It was the kind of day that no husband ever wants to face. Amber, my wife of 23 years, told me she was going to start seeing other men starting tonight. I sat there in our kitchen, clutching a glass of monkey shoulder scotch, not quite knowing what to do for 10 whole minutes. I didn't take a single sip, I just stared off into space, numb like the world around me had frozen. I couldn't see, couldn't hear, but I could feel this deep ache building inside me. It was a twist of pain that I knew no drink or medication could touch. I'd heard stories and rumors. It's about men whose wives told them they wanted to date others. I'd always brushed it off as some crazy urban legend. I thought it was something that happened to other people whose marriages didn't have the same foundation or love as ours. But now here I am. Amber was supposed to be my partner in the rock. I thought she'd stand by me. I couldn't get my head around it. How could she even consider this? How could she put her own wants above everything we'd built? The day itself had been so ordinary and pleasant. I left work at 5. I walked through the front door whistling and feeling good, ready to relax. There was Amber at the kitchen table with a glass of red wine, looking relaxed and like she was waiting for me. She seemed normal, but there was something about her that I couldn't put my finger on. I sat down, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened my briefcase. I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat down opposite her. She was looking at me with a kind of GL glint in her eye and a sly, almost mischievous smile. I raised my eyebrows and asked, "What's on your mind, Amber?" I was curious but completely unprepared for what was coming next. She locked eyes with me and her smile faded into something more serious. "John," she began, her voice calm and measured. "Amber asked me if I thought I'd been a good wife and mother all these years." I was taken aback because it wasn't like her to ask such a direct question. After a moment, I answered that I'd say she'd done a great job. Amber tilted her head, her gaze still steady. She then asked if I thought she deserved some recognition for that. I shifted in my seat, trying to figure out where she was going with this. "Amber, should I expect a reward for doing what's expected of me as a good husband and father?" "Me? What exactly are you getting at?" "Amber, tonight I want to go out with another man." "Me what?" My mind went blank. My stomach was in knots. I sat there, frozen, trying to process what she had just said. She looked at me with the same calm expression as if she knew exactly what I was thinking and had already braced herself for it. She nodded slowly, her eyes meeting mine. "John, I want to go out with another man," she said. "After 24 years of being exclusively yours, I think I've earned the right to. I'm not looking for love, just a little excitement. I'm 47 now, and I know I won't be this desirable forever. I want to experience what it feels like to still have options." I was completely floored. My jaw hung open as I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. But she just kept looking at me, her face set, her mind made up. "Damn," I muttered to myself as she stood up and walked upstairs. I heard her moving around and changing her clothes. When she came back down, she looked like a vision that was both stunning and terrifying to me. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places with a cutout that showed just enough to catch a man's eye. Her dress was barely mid-thigh length, and she wore it like it was made just for her. Her makeup was minimal, but her long blonde hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, drawing attention to her face. She looked every bit as beautiful as the day I'd first laid eyes on her, and I was both mesmerized and horrified by it. "I'm not letting this happen," I said, standing up. "I don't know what you're planning, but you're not going out like this. Not while you're still my wife." She looked at me, her smile twisting into something bitter. "You're not going to stop me. You know you're not going to divorce me over this. Where else would you find someone like me? And if we split, the kids would be furious with you for breaking up the family. Let me enjoy myself tonight, and then it'll be you and me again, growing old together." I couldn't believe the confidence in her voice. It was as if she knew she held all the cards. She leaned in to kiss me goodbye, but I pulled back, feeling like I'd been slapped. Her face shifted for a split second from surprise to hurt. Then she got more distant. "Maybe she'll be back," she said, her voice flat, before she walked out the door. I watched her leave, rooted to the spot, my entire world unraveling in that single moment. She didn't even look back as I stood there, memories of Amber's beauty and how it shaped her life flooding my mind. From a young age, she was the kind of girl who could get nearly anything with a smile or a little bit of makeup. She'd learned early that her looks were more than just good fortune. They were a power she could wield, and she'd used that power effortlessly. I remember the first day I saw her. My family had just moved to a new town right before I started 8th grade, and that first day of school was a blur. I walked into the building, and there she was, laughing with her friends, and looking like she belonged in a different world. She had a natural grace that set her apart from everyone else. I was instantly captivated, but it took me a while to work up the courage to ask her out. Eventually, I did, and to my surprise, she said yes. We became a couple. They were together all the time, inseparable, but she had other admirers. During junior year, she left me for Mike Lester, a football player with the looks and popularity to match. Back then, I was just a skinny kid trying to find my way. I knew I didn't measure up by the time we reached senior year. I'd gained a couple of inches and put on some muscle. I did gain some muscle, but even then, I couldn't match Mike, or the image of the kind of guy Amber usually wanted. I went to prom with a girl who was nice enough, but she wasn't Amber. Meanwhile, Amber stood there in her prom queen's crown beside her prom king, the perfect couple everyone admired. Amber's beauty was more than just a gift. It was her ticket, her tool, something. She was lucky in that she could use her charm and intimacy to her advantage. I was no exception. She had me wrapped around her finger from the very beginning, and I hadn't realized how tightly until now. After high school, I went off to the University of Minnesota to study accounting. Those 4 years were a mix of classes, part-time work, and a few casual dates here and there. Time, work, and a few casual dates here and there, though nothing serious. Meanwhile, Amber headed to Minnesota State University for a degree in marketing. College life was different for her. She dated, and, from what I later heard, didn't hold back in exploring the dating scene. She even got involved with one of her marketing professors, which interestingly helped raise her grade from a B to an A. By then, she was a master at getting what she wanted through sheer coincidence. We both ended up with jobs in the US after graduation. Nearly a year after we settled into our new lives, I went out one Friday night with some colleagues. We'd been chatting, laughing, and having a few drinks at a popular bar and grill when Amber walked in with 2 friends. She was wearing a short green dress with a plunging neckline that turned heads across the room. Everyone was looking at her. She was that striking. One of my colleagues, Robert Dunn, was the first to speak up at our table. "Who's that goddess?" he said, his eyes fixed on her. I answered, "Guys, meet Amber. She's a goddess and my middle school sweetheart." Heads turned toward me in shock. "Wait, you know her?" one of them asked. I winced. I wasn't one for attention, so I kept it brief. "Yeah, we were close at 14, but by the time I got to high school, I was like invisible. She ignored me for the whole 4 years. There were a few chuckles around the table, and one of the women nudged me. She said she had some juicy stories from back then. She teased me, and I laughed awkwardly, hoping to change the subject. But Amber must have caught the exchange. She looked over, her eyes narrowing as if she almost recognized me. Her friend sat down nearby, and I noticed she was facing us. Robert nudged me, whispering, "Why don't you go say hi? You're practically drooling." Casey, another colleague, joined in, saying, "Yeah, go for it, or at least stop staring." I shook my head. She'd acted like she didn't know me for 4 years of high school. I doubted she'd remember me now. I was trying to play it cool, but I couldn't deny the slight thrill of seeing her. Amber kept glancing in our direction, and finally, as if a light bulb went off, she snapped her fingers and pointed at John. She called out, got up, and came over. She was clearly recognizing him now, and approached with that effortless confidence and a smile on her face. Amber said hello to the other workers before standing to greet her. I said, "It's nice to see you," trying to keep my tone neutral, but she wasn't done making a scene before I could react. She wrapped her arm around me and kissed me right on the lips. I was stunned, and so were my colleagues. Amber noticed my reaction and flashed me a smile that hinted she was fully aware of the stir she just caused. I could see she was enjoying every second of it, knowing she still held that power over. "Come on, join us at our table," she urged, taking my hand and practically dragging me along. I spent the evening with Amber and her 2 friends, trying to keep things casual. She was her usual charming self, flirting and throwing me these little looks and even planting a few more kisses. I didn't respond the way I knew she wanted, though. I kept my focus half on her, half on her friends, which seemed to intrigue her even more. By the end of the night, she'd put her number in my phone and taken mine in return. That Monday morning, when I got to work on Monday morning, my colleagues were all asking me about Amber. Robert was still amazed by her, so I told him how I'd ended up leaving so early. I said she was impressive, but she was way out of my league. I'm not signing up for that kind of drama, but I wasn't quite done with Amber. 2 days later, I found her waiting by my car after work. She was dressed in an Her outfit was a size too small, showing off her figure. My pulse quickened as I approached, and I had to remind myself to stay calm. "Why didn't you call John?" she murmured, her voice soft and alluring. I tried to keep my eyes from wandering, but it was impossible. Her top was unbuttoned just enough to catch any man's attention, and her skirt barely covered what it needed. "Oh my God," I muttered under my breath, trying to steady myself as she leaned in, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me with a passion that left no room for doubt. She pressed against me and my hands found her waist, one of them inadvertently grazing her bare backside as her dress rode up. She slipped her tongue into my mouth, and for a minute I forgot where I was. We finally pulled apart, and she adjusted her dress, giving a little smile to the colleagues who drove past, probably wondering what they'd just witnessed. We went out to a restaurant on the edge of town where we had a nice dinner, though I couldn't help but notice her constantly tugging at her dress, which amused both me and the waitress. Despite everything, part of me remained cautious around Amber. Knowing the kind of spell she could cast, I was still a bit cautious around Amber, knowing the kind of impression she could make. But when we finally got back to her place and she undressed, I couldn't resist. She looked like the goddess I'd always remembered. I told myself that if this was my only chance, I'd make the most of it. As we lay there, she looked into my eyes and grinned. "I made a big mistake years ago," she whispered, brushing her hand over my face. "You're incredible, John. I can't believe we wasted all that time that night. Something rekindled between us. Amber saw potential in me, even if I wasn't on her level in terms of looks. I was fit, driven, and according to her, had proved my worth in ways that mattered. As we started spending more time together, I knew I was falling. I eventually bought an engagement ring for the woman behind that beautiful face, but I knew we needed to have a serious talk first. One night over dinner, I put a small black box on the table and looked her in the eye. "What happened in the past stays in the past," I said. "But moving forward, I want full exclusivity between us, no exceptions. If you can't commit to that, I need to." Amber met my gaze, her expression serious. Before glancing at the box, she promised, "I will never betray my husband." I opened the box and held on to her words. She'd stayed loyal, as far as I knew, turning down opportunities that would have tempted anyone. She was a perfect 10, no a 12, and I was maybe a 6 at best. I'd been grateful, thinking I told her I loved her and I meant it. I meant it for life, not just 23 years. Looking back, I wondered if she still felt the same. She still got attention from men and sometimes even women. Amber knew she was extraordinary. She was a rare beauty among the merely attractive. For 23 years, she'd been my everything. I had a pretty good day, Amber. I used to joke that she'd tell me whenever someone hit on her. In those early years, she was pretty open about it. After a while, though, I told her it wasn't necessary. I trusted her completely. I just asked that she tell me if someone didn't take no for an answer so I could step in if things got out of hand. As for me, women rarely approached my wedding ring. It served as a shield, and the moment I met a new woman, I'd make sure to mention Amber and the kids. I figured it was better to put up boundaries from the start. However, Amber never seemed to notice how quickly I shut down any potential flirtations for years. Our marriage seemed like something out of a storybook. Then a new face showed up at Amber's PR firm. Paulina Lopez was like something straight out of a song. Thick dark hair, big brown eyes, and a figure that pulled people in wherever she went. She worked as Amber's assistant at Superior Solutions, and wasn't shy about flaunting her looks or her stories of wild romances outside her marriage. Paulina had been married for 15 years. She was open about her extracurricular activities, often painting vivid pictures of her passionate encounters. One afternoon over coffee, Paulina leaned in and asked, "So, you've never strayed? Come on, you seem like the perfect wife, but don't you ever crave a little something on the side?" Amber laughed and brushed it off. I was curious, but I could never betray John. Lately, though, Amber has been feeling insecure. She'd noticed that when we went out, the attention she used to command had started drifting toward younger women. The realization bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Paulina grinned and leaned in closer. "Let's play a little game of what if. What if John gave you permission? That would change things." Amber's expression softened with a hint of intrigue, as if she was considering it for the first time. "If I had his blessing, yeah, that would change everything," she admitted with a mischievous smile. Paulina chuckled, then suggested, "Maybe you should ask." Amber looked hesitant, but a spark of intrigue flickered. Amber said she thought John would never go for it. She shook her head, and Paulina's eyes glinted with mischief. She told Amber to ask him, and if he loves her, he'll understand. She also said that Amber wasn't looking for love. She already had that with John. Amber just wanted a little fun. I woke up to the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. It was past 3:00 a.m. It was 3 p.m. I looked at the half-empty bottle of Woodford Reserve beside me as Amber came through the door, looking a bit worse for wear. Her hair was messy, her makeup was smudged, and her clothes were rumpled. She had an odd look on her face, almost smoky. "Good night," I said, my voice thick with sarcasm as I studied her. "You didn't have to wait up," she replied, rolling her eyes. She headed straight for the stairs. "Good night to you too, but let's get one thing straight. This is how it's going to be. I'm done waiting for you." She shot me a glare and kept walking up to bed. I poured myself another drink and settled into the recliner, flipping on ESPN, but barely paying attention. By morning, I'd slept fitfully. As I made breakfast, I heard the shower running upstairs. Usually, Amber would come down in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, but today she was fully dressed and looking ready for the day. She glanced around, the kitchen, and then at me. "Did you leave me anything to eat?" she asked, coolly. I gestured to the coffee pot. "I made coffee. You can make the rest yourself." I paused, looking at her firmly. "Since we're both here, let's talk." Amber's eyes widened slightly, probably surprised at my tone. I could tell she expected me to be either fuming or withdrawn. Not composed, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a meltdown. "Don't you want to know how last night went?" I asked, sounding almost amused. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay calm. "No, I don't need to hear about that. What I need to know is what your vision for our marriage looks like from here." She took a deep breath, her voice adopting a strangely casual tone. "As I mentioned yesterday, I want to explore for a while. I'm not looking for love with anyone else. That's for us, but I do want the thrill of something different. You're incredible, but I want to enjoy what's out there while I'm still desirable. Afterwards, it'll be just us again, growing old together. I'll be yours fully, but for now, I need this." I stared at her as I made toast and jam. She was discussing our entire future and our life together. While she spoke, I buttered a piece of toast like it was just another topic. 1,000 questions raced through my mind, but only a few made it to my lips. "Lips, is this just about variety?" I asked, my voice strained. "Am I not enough for you?" Before she could answer, I continued. "So you're proposing an open marriage, then back to monogamy, and that would go both ways, right? I'd be free to see other people too." Amber gave a short laugh, like the idea was amusing to her. The thought of her mild-mannered husband trying to date was apparently laughable, but she nodded, clearly willing to make that concession. "Sure, if that's what you want," she said. "What do you need to be on board with this? I'd expect it to be strictly physical for you too." I raised my eyebrows and shrugged. She didn't seem to catch the meaning of my gesture, but I think she had an inkling. Her face brightened slightly as she added, "In fact, there's Paulina, my friend from the office. She's great, and I'm sure she'd be interested. I could set you two up sometime." I felt my stomach turn. Part of me was lustful and reckless, and part of me was tempted. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I shook my head. "Thanks for the offer, Amber, but no, that would make me just as much a cheater as you were last night." Her smug smile twisted into a scowl. "I am not a cheater," she hissed. "Well, if you say so," I replied, meeting her gaze unflinchingly. "That doesn't mean I agree to this." She stared back, eyes narrowing. "You'll come around, John. I'm doing this with or without your blessing." Monday morning rolled around, and by 11, Paulina was already in Amber's office. She must have picked up on Amber's bad mood. Amber muttered something about me being close. Paulina was clearly annoyed. She frowned and looked over her shoulder as she shut the office door. "Turned down a date with me, huh?" I didn't expect to be on the table, but I thought I was irresistible. She struck a pose and gestured to herself with a smirk. Amber managed a weak smile, but I knew better. She was frustrated, and Paulina's support was only. Paulina asked Amber how the date went. "Did you enjoy it, or did John ruin it?" Amber laughed. She was happy to talk about it. She said that John knows how to treat a woman. It's been a while since she's been on a date. She appreciated the change. Who should she try next? They both laughed. Amber hadn't talked about the divorce. I was still hoping she'd come to her senses and abandon this reckless behavior. I still believed we could get past this if she just stopped. My optimism flickered a bit brighter when she skipped a date the following week. We still slept in separate rooms and barely talked, but I thought there was a chance she might rethink this whole thing. On Friday, she turned up looking all dressed up and ready to go out. I was really disappointed. "Is it the same guy or someone new this time?" I asked, sounding a bit sharper than I'd intended. Amber shot me an annoyed look and said, "Did you hear anything I said?" I replied, "This isn't about you. It's about me wanting to live a little while I still can. I'm not losing interest. John, I just want a bit of variety. I get pursued all the time and I want to indulge for once, but I'll always come back to you." She added as if that made it better, "What if I don't want you to come back?" I replied, my voice firm. "I can't stand by while you go out and have fun with other men. This isn't what I signed up for. I won't sit here while you parade around. I could maybe put up with it if it was just the one man, but twice is too much." She laughed, waving her fingers in a mocking gesture. "Oh, John, you don't really want to lose me, do you? It doesn't have to be all or nothing." The next day, I asked my lawyer to draw up divorce papers, even though I hoped I'd never need them. I planned to. I'm meeting with Amber on Monday, but first I had to call our daughters. Neither Emma, 21, nor Mia, 19, seemed particularly surprised. When I spoke with them, it became clear that Emma might have known what was going on. She was heading down this path and didn't tell me. "I was shocked," Emma replied. Her voice was strained. "No matter what I did, one of you would be upset with me. Besides, it's her body, not yours." "Don't go there, Emma," I interrupted, trying to keep my composure. "I get that this was hard on you, but don't tell me she can do whatever she wants, as if it's fine. There were vows made and commitments." "Sorry, Dad," she murmured, clearly upset. Amber came home around 2 a.m., an hour earlier than the last time, but she looked just as disheveled. I wasn't there to see it. I'd left a while ago, but I imagined the smug look she wore as she returned from another man's arms. I learned later that she'd been with Ernesto Lopez, a big, strong man who left her barely able to move. She even bragged about how great the night had been. But when she opened a letter at work on Monday morning and found the divorce papers, Amber broke down. She went to the restroom in tears, where Paulina found her. Paulina said, "You had to know he'd serve you eventually." She added, "Men can be childish like that. They love to retaliate. Give him a week or so. He'll come around." Amber dried her tears and tried to compose herself. She went back to her desk, picked up her phone, and called me right away. "How could you do this, John? In front of everyone at work? I know you're hurt, but I deserve better." "Amber, after 23 years, don't I deserve better than you making decisions on your own to open our marriage? If you thought I wasn't right for you, couldn't you have told me so we could end things civilly?" I replied, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "I don't want civility or a divorce, John. I still love you." My love was endless, but maybe we were both wrong despite the tension. Amber went ahead with the divorce, and her lawyer arranged for marriage counseling. I reluctantly agreed to attend, and when we walked into the counselor's office, I was surprised to see Rosalind Walker, a renowned consultant with a reputation for aiming to reconcile couples, often with a bias in favor of the wife. I wondered how that would play out here. "Let's start with the basics." The counselor said, her voice was calm. "Mrs. Brown, did you tell your husband that you wanted to date other men for a few years?" Amber shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, I did," she said quietly. The counselor's face hardened. "So you wanted this arrangement for yourself, without thinking about how it would affect your husband?" Amber's face darkened. "That's what I want, but it doesn't mean I don't care about him." The counselor's eyes were like steel. "If you thought this behavior could be justified, you're delusional. You should be ashamed of yourself, but clearly you're not." Amber sat there in stunned silence over the next month. She tried calling me almost daily and texting constantly, but I ignored nearly every message. I'd moved into a small apartment nearby, and eventually she got our daughters to contact me. One evening, over the phone, she asked if I still loved her. She'd stopped seeing other men. Would you give her another chance? "Wait, she's still seeing others?" I asked, my voice trembling. The silence that followed was answer enough. Mia never called again to urge me toward reconciliation. News of the divorce spread quickly, and I was surprised by the number of single women at work who reached out, expressing sympathy and offering support. Even some mutual friends like Montserrat Flores reached out. She was a longtime friend. Amber and I had known each other for years, but I was surprised by the way she spoke to me. "I'd never go after a friend's husband," Montserrat assured me. "But now that you're single, things are different. I'm interested in you," John, Montserrat told me over lunch one afternoon, catching me off guard. I was surprised but flattered. I replied, managing a smile, "But I'm not officially single yet, Montserrat. I won't start anything until the divorce is finalized. Call me old-fashioned, but I'm not about to cheat." She was dressed up, but she wasn't about to cheat. Montserrat laughed. "You're such a Boy Scout, John. It's one of the things I admire about you." She paused for a moment before adding, "Could we at least go out once things are settled?" "Sure," I replied. I knew this might complicate her friendship with Amber, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to mess up your friendship with Amber. You two go way back. She waved it off. "I appreciate your concern, but I won't let a good opportunity pass just because it's unconventional." She gave me a playful look. "Maybe I'll give you a call once you're officially off the leash." Montserrat was a striking woman. She was tall, fit, and had long hair. She had glossy black hair and a sharp wit, and I couldn't deny my interest, though her forwardness caught me by surprise. I reached out to her on the day my divorce was finalized, and we went out for dinner that Saturday night, and then stopped by a jazz club afterwards. I noticed my awkwardness, and Monsieur teased me. I feel like I'm out with a teenager on his first date. It's been over 26 years since I went on a date with anyone other than Amber. I laughed at my own discomfort, saying, "Oh, is the condom in your wallet the same one you had before Amber?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. I laughed, feeling my cheeks. "Ren, I didn't even by the end of the night. We'd shared a gentle kiss that left us both smiling. I promised to call her again, removing my wedding ring. That day, I hadn't felt significant, but apparently it was a big deal to some of the single women at work. As soon as they noticed the flirting, it ramped up. This was new. I realized that I was in a bit of a no man's land. One day at lunch, I told my best friend at work, Robert. He said, "There are so many attractive women in this office." I replied, "I didn't notice before." Robert laughed and said, "You were the epitome of a henpecked husband." He added, "You were so much in love that you didn't. Even looking at other women is a problem. Amber's beautiful, but you let her have all the power. Maybe that's part of the problem in that first month after the divorce." I went on 4 dates, including 2 more with Montserrat. I hadn't taken any of them further at first, but by the second month, I'd ended up sleeping with 2. Some of my daughter's friends had heard Amber say that while she could have any man she wanted, I was struggling to find companionship. 2 months after the divorce, my daughters paid me a surprise visit one Saturday morning. I'd entertained a guest the night before, Kim, who was 25. I was dating a 25-year-old who needed a wedding date. The evening went well, and we ended up back at my place. Kim had fallen asleep in my bed, and I hadn't even thought to set an alarm when I opened the door at 8. I'm 36. Morning. Emma and Mia stood there smiling with bags of breakfast. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to look more awake. They stepped in. "Hi, Dad. Can we join you for breakfast?" Emma chirped, unpacking bagels and cream cheese. I was pouring coffee when Kim appeared in one of my shirts, half-buttoned and definitely braless. Her hair was still tousled from sleep. She smiled at us sleepily. "I didn't know we had guests, babe," she said, giving me a quick kiss. My daughter started in silence, cheeks flushing as Kim grabbed a mug and poured herself coffee. "No, Kim. These are my daughters and Mia," I explained, gesturing. "Oh, nice to meet you." Kim laughed, sitting beside me and brushing against my arm. Emma and Mia tried to act casual, but I could see the questions brewing. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Dad, how are things with Mom?" she asked. My mood shifted as I remembered the bitterness that I still felt a bit awkward with Kim there, even though she'd only just arrived. Mia spoke up, her tone gentle. "We thought you might miss Mom by now." I shook my head, unable to hide the hurt I was feeling. I was her anchor, but she'd moved on. She'd been entertaining friends in our old bed, 2 at a time. Emma looked shocked, while Kim laughed and said, "So how many guys has she been with since you split?" 20 guys, 3 a month, that's 30. My daughter shot Kim a look that could kill. Clearly unimpressed by Kim's bluntness, she muttered, "It's not my fault if someone else can't keep their legs closed." "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, cutting in, "but you're going to ruin a good breakfast." They murmured, glancing between each other and Kim. Emma finally asked, "So are you two a thing?" Kim laughed. "Oh, don't worry. I'm just friends with your dad. He's great, but I'm not planning on being a stepmom. We're just too many people we just enjoy each other's company. We know he's a good guy, but he can be a bit of an idiot sometimes," Emma joked, giving me a playful smile. "He is pretty cute, even if he is old enough to be your dad. I think there's more to it than just spending a lot of time together. I don't think he'll be coming back to you anytime soon." Amber was clearly annoyed. She probably just caught him on a good day. She's likely to sleep with anyone, he muttered. Emma raised her voice slightly. My dad's a good man, Mum. He's not a player, but somewhere along the line, everything became about you. Was it worth it? Amber's face paled. Her composure faltered for the first time. She couldn't bring herself to admit it, but things weren't going as well as she'd hoped. As she'd led on to Paulina, she talked about her adventures. Privately, she hadn't anticipated that I would move on so quickly, or that women would find me so desirable. She had assumed I'd spend my days moping over her, not dating. Now, not only had I moved on, but I'd also been seeing several women, including Montserrat, her own friend. She discovered this by chance and assumed it was just a date until she learned of a second, outraged Amber. She confronted Montserrat. I thought we were Amber confronted Montserrat at a cafe. She said, "You're supposed to have my back." Montserrat stayed calm and didn't get defensive. He said, "Amber, he didn't hurt you. He's a wonderful guy. He's everything I want in a man. Why shouldn't I date him? Plenty of women are." Amber was interested in John. He was a catch and a gentleman. She stood there speechless, realizing just how much she'd taken for granted. It was sinking in that she might have made a mistake. She couldn't undo it. It was the first time she genuinely felt the emptiness of. Amber was facing the reality of sleeping alone each night, which she dreaded. Meanwhile, my life had taken on a level of activity I hadn't anticipated. I used to be content with a simple routine, but things had changed. Work was fulfilling, my social life was lively, and I enjoyed dating women of different ages. I wasn't actively looking for anything long-term, but I appreciated the variety life now offered. One memorable date was with Vicky Price, a striking woman with shoulder-length silver hair streaked with purple. She wore a Milwaukee Brewers cap over her ponytail, and her snug blue Brewers shirt and light blue jeans highlighted her fit, youthful figure. She was 60, but she carried herself with a vibrancy that drew plenty of looks at American Family Field, where we'd gone to catch a game. Vicky had worked with me for over 15 years, and we'd met a few times at company events. She had long silver hair streaked with purple, and she was wearing a Milwaukee Brewer cap over her ponytail, along with a snug blue Brewer shirt and light blue jeans that highlighted her fit and youthful figure. She was 60, but she carried herself with a vibrancy that drew plenty of looks at American Family Field, where we'd gone to catch a game. Vicky had worked with me for over 15 years, and we'd met a few times at company events. I always thought you were. Vicky told me she was looking for someone kind and handsome when she first reached out after losing her husband in a car accident 5 years earlier. She hadn't dated much but eventually decided to give me a call. I remembered her well. She was the kind of woman who exudes elegance and charm. So when she asked me to dinner, I readily agreed. Our first date was a few months back. We dined at an upscale restaurant and then attended. Vicky had tickets to a performance at the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra that night, and we ended up going out for a drink after the show. We went hiking on a Saturday, and I was pretty out of shape, but Vicky was a seasoned hiker. I ended up having to take a few breaks, and she just laughed at me. She had a great body, and these really captivating gray eyes that were hard to look away from. We ended up having a great evening back at her place. It was a really special moment for us. I suggested a weekend sightseeing trip in Milwaukee, which Vicky was up for. During that trip, she told me she wasn't planning on telling Amber about our relationship. She said she wouldn't deny it if asked, but there was no need to advertise it. Apparently, Amber had told their CO workers. I told them we divorced over irreconcilable differences, which was the diplomatic version of the truth. I also told them that Amber had been unfaithful with at least 2 men, but I didn't share any more details. 2 years after the divorce, I had built several solid relationships and was enjoying a satisfying social life. Many of the women I dated admired me and saw potential in our connection, but I wasn't rushing into anything. I wanted to rebuild trust and perhaps one day pursue marriage again. Amber, on the other hand, hadn't been interested in any serious relationships. She told me long before we divorced that she was only looking for physical encounters. This difference between us, me seeking companionship, her chasing thrills, seemed to be the reason why we were both better off apart. But this difference presented a challenge for our daughter Emma, who was planning her wedding, which I was funding. When Amber suggested to Emma that we both attend the wedding unaccompanied to avoid any tension, Emma reluctantly agreed and brought it up to me over lunch. "Is this your idea or your mother's?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Emma sighed. "I thought you'd be up for it to keep things easier, to avoid any drama," she said. I'm paying for this wedding and I intend to enjoy it with a date by my side, I replied. I took dance lessons specifically for your wedding and I'm looking forward to. Emma, if she wants to come alone, fine. If she wants a date, fine. But I'm bringing a date, and I won't hear any more about it. Emma nodded, understanding my point. All right, Dad. I'll talk to her. I can't wait to see those dance moves. Could you? I laughed. Maybe, but you'll have to get used to seeing me and Kim on the dance floor when the big day came. I escorted Montserrat Flores to the wedding. We didn't see eye to eye about the sea green dress I picked for her, but I wanted her to have something. Emma was new, and she eventually wore it. Walking Emma down the aisle was as emotional as I'd expected. It was a wonderful day, and as I looked around, I felt grateful for everything in my life that had led me to this moment. The reception was lively. Montserrat, the kids, and I all danced well into the night. The only slight hiccup was when Amber arrived with her date. I wasn't bothered by it throughout the wedding, but Amber's date was a bit of a rough drunk, leering at me and at several other women when Emma asked her to do something, and Amber quickly asked him to leave. She seemed embarrassed. Later, in a brief encounter near the restrooms, she confronted Montserrat, accusing her of stealing her man. Montserrat remained silent, saying that Jan had divorced her before they ever began dating. She said quietly, walking past Amber without further argument, unwilling to spoil Emma's special day. A few months after the wedding, Mia stopped by my place looking uncomfortable. I could tell something was bothering her, so I asked, Mia, what's on your mind? You've been on edge all evening. Her face flushed. Dad, sometimes Mom talks about reconciling. She says she wants to win you back once she's done dating around. She paused, struggling to find the right words. I guess I just wondered if you'd gotten close to anyone or anything. I was taken aback. My personal life is not your concern, young lady, but I have not been with your mother. If you were asking about my relationship with her, I will tell you. Your mother has an STD. I overheard her telling a friend she was treated for syphilis. I was taken aback. Mia watched me closely, seeing the sadness in my eyes. I appreciate you telling me, honey, I replied, my voice softening. It's standard practice to let partners know so they can get tested. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, she said quietly. I know my mom is still seeing other people, but it's just hard when people talk about her, A few days later, Vicky called to say she'd heard the rumors and was worried about her own health. I assured her I hadn't been with Amber. I understand your concern, but there's not much I can do about her choices. Vicky sighed. My life has become a scandal, to put it mildly. Amber's STD scare had died down, and she began to plot a reunion. She was convinced that I missed her and would want her back. She believed that no one else could match. She assumed she was irreplaceable, and she might have been right if other women hadn't entered my life. They were confident in their own beauty, and couldn't fathom that I might find happiness elsewhere. I know he's great, but these women must be blind if they think he's on my level. She told Paulina over margaritas one evening, irritated by the attention I was getting, but even Amber couldn't deny it. After my divorce, I was happy to report that my post-marital life had been fulfilling. In contrast, she said that hers had been a string of shallow encounters. One day, I picked up the phone to hear a familiar voice. I hadn't spoken to Amber in nearly 2 years, and I guessed that one of our daughters had given her my new number. I hadn't forbidden them from doing so, but I made it clear that I didn't need to stay in touch with them. Amber, hi John. Her voice was sugary. Amber, you still think the world revolves around you. Look, I don't hate you, but the past is done. I have no reason to go back. She sighed. You're still angry with me. I know. Maybe I should have just cheated quietly, but that felt dishonest. Amber, it was still cheating just because you warned me. That doesn't make it less real. You did it because you thought I'd never leave. Did you think so little of me? I know you think you're a 10, even a 12. But these last few years have shown me I'm more than just the husband of a beautiful woman. Other women see value in me and actually want to reciprocate emotionally. My life has been better than I ever imagined. Why would I want to go back to a one-sided relationship? I don't think I can go back to a one-sided relationship with someone who never respected me. John? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Absolutely, he said, feeling a sense of closure as he hung up. He turned to the woman next to him and grinned, ready for round 2. Who did you find, Kim? He asked. Kim flashed a smile and took his hand. I married my soulmate and continued my relationships with Montserrat and Vicky, loving them each in my own way without remarrying. They loved me too, and both accepted our unconventional dynamic. Several years later, they both joined me at Mia's wedding, which didn't sit well with Amber. She hadn't brought a date and I could. She wasn't happy about it. She told Mia during lunch afterwards. Mia just shrugged. Emma, Montserrat, and Vicky are the closest people in Dad's life. They love him for who he is and put him before their own needs. I can't say that about everyone. He was yours and you left him just because you were afraid. As it turned out, he was wrong to think he'd have no other options. I was content with my life, even if it hadn't been my original plan. Leaving a situation I'd once deemed unacceptable led me to something better, something I hadn't expected. As for Amber, she was still attractive and frequently approached, enjoying She'd been in relationships, but nothing had lasted. She'd sometimes admit to herself that she regretted her choices. I'd been there for her, but in her search for more, she'd let it all slip away.